Hi everyone, I welcome you all to the new session of our social science online class. Today we are beginning a new lesson from history. Before starting this, I want to give some important instructions to you. My dear children, we have completed our geography lesson in the previous week. And I told many times, I told you to post your notebooks in the Google Classrooms. And not only that, I sent the messages and I told you to join in the Google Classrooms. But only 52 students have joined. And very few have posted your notebooks. 2 assignments work I have given. And very few have posted your notes. I don't know what is the reason. If you have any network problems, you inform me. Or otherwise, you have to send your notebooks to my WhatsApp number. And few students have called me and they told their problems. I told them to send their projects and assignments to my WhatsApp number. And anyhow, tomorrow, all these previous notebooks, you should either post in the classroom, Google Classroom. Otherwise, if you have anybody have any network or connection problems, you have to send your notebooks to my WhatsApp number. Is it okay? Can you do that? Otherwise, it is difficult for me to check your notebooks. Notebooks checking is important and then only you can study in the proper way. That's why you send your notebooks or you post your notebooks in the Google Classroom. If it is in Google Classroom, it is very easy for me. Okay? Do it and study that portion. We completed 2 geography lessons. Today we are starting history portions. I begin 5th lesson in history. First 2 lessons already taken. Father has taken the first 2 lessons. How, when and where, and from trade to territory. These 2 lessons Father has already explained, you already learned. Now we are starting 3 and 4 we can take later because we are starting the 5th lesson because that lesson is the continuation of the 2nd lesson. That means it is very easy to understand. That's why I have chosen that lesson for today's class. Okay? The 5th lesson from history, when the people rebel. That is the lesson. That is the topic. When the people rebel. 1857 revolt. You already heard, Father has already told you about 1857 revolt or First War of Independence. In this lesson, we are studying about First War of Independence. Okay? 1857 revolt or rebellion of 1857. The rebellion or revolt started in 1857 was known as First War of Indian Independence. That means Indians organized a war, a revolt against British for what? For independence. The first war of Indian independence. We are discussing about this important historical event in this lesson. That means we are discussing 3 important aspects. One is what are the causes of first war of Indian independence? Why did Indians revolt against British? What were the causes or reasons of 1857 revolt? The next 2nd part we are discussing cause. That means what are the important incidents which were happened during this period. And the next last part is what was the results of 1857 revolt. That means what happened in India after 1857 revolt. These 3 very important historical aspects we are discussing in this lesson. Right? Okay. First War of Indian Independence or 1857 revolt. First we are discussing the causes of reasons or causes of 1857 rebellion. And then we have already or you have already studied that India before 1857 in the 2nd chapter. Just we can go through that important area what you have already learned in the 2nd chapter. Okay? And as you learned, in 1600, British came here to India and they established English East India Company. Got it? English East India Company, a trading company, was set up by the British in 1600. That means from 1600, British started their trade activities with India because they wanted raw material. They wanted raw material and especially cotton and spices from India. That's why they came here and started their trade activities. And that means initial period, they had no other aim. Their aim was to purchase these trade articles. But later, they gradually interfered in the political aspects, political administration, which resulted lots of war, lots of battles between different Indian rulers. By that time, great Mughal dynasty was ruled over India. And that when the British came here, Jahangir was the ruler. Then Bahadur Shah Zafar was the last Mughal ruler. That already you learned. That means in the initial stage, their main aim was to set up or establish trade contacts, but later they started interfering in the political administration of India. This resulted a war. We cannot discuss, or we are not discussing all the topic. We are discussing important area only. And this interference resulted a war or battle between the ruler of or Nawab of Mysore or Nawab Sirajuddaula, Bengal, Nawab of Bengal in 1757. 1757, a battle fought between British under Robert Clive, you already learned, and Nawab of Bengal, Sirajuddaula. What that was known as Battle of Plassey. Battle of Plassey was a turning point in the history of India because it marked British won the battle and it marked the establishment of British political administration in India. And after 1757 Battle of Plassey, they fought against many rulers of India, like battle against Marathas, battle against Mysore, etc. That means they annexed many provinces. By that time, India was ruled by many rulers, and they annexed or declared direct annexation against these rulers. Besides this direct annexation, they introduced lots of policies. These activities introduced by the British, which made problems in India, which dissatisfied the Indians. This dissatisfaction was the main cause of 1857 revolt. That means these activities or policies introduced by the British in India made or dissatisfied Indians, and they started thinking about a rebellion against British. That was 1857 revolt. Okay, and what were these activities taken by the British? What were the policies introduced by the British? That were the causes of 1857 revolt. And what were these policies? We are discussing. We are discussing the policies introduced by the British. That were the main causes of 1857 revolt. Let us discuss these causes. Okay? First, we are discussing the administrative or political causes. Okay, that already you learned. What were the administrative causes or administrative policies, political policies introduced by the British? These policies dissatisfied the Indians. That means these policies worried Indian leaders because the rulers of India gradually lost their power. And what were these policies? Can you name some policies introduced by the British that you already learned in second chapter? Yes, you know, everyone knows, I think. The first and foremost important policy introduced by the British was the policy of subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance was a policy. Okay, subsidiary alliance. As per this alliance, Indian rulers were not allowed to keep their army. Instead, British provide the army. For the maintenance of this army, Indian rulers were agreed or were compelled, forced to pay the money. That means Indian rulers were not allowed to keep their army. Instead, British provide the army. Indian rulers were forced to make payments. And then, though if any ruler who failed to make these payments, their kingdom will be taken by the British. And as you learned that many native dynasties lost their power. Many kingdoms or territories were taken by the British under the subsidiary alliance. This worried the Indian rulers because they lost. Many kingdoms were attached by the British, means they all lost their administration, lost their power. They were all revolted against the British. Clear? Okay, and besides subsidiary alliance, another important policy was doctrine of lapse. As you learned, doctrine of lapse introduced by Lord Dalhousie, which prohibited or Indian rulers to inherit the property of their fathers. That means, according to this doctrine of lapse, the adopted son had no power to inherit the property of their fathers. Okay, and earlier adopted son had right, but British or doctrine of lapse or Dalhousie and was not allowed the rulers to get or adopted son to get their power. And many rulers, many kingdoms were taken away by the British. They all lost their administration power. The very important ruler or area taken by the British under doctrine of lapse was, as you already learned, Jhansi. Jhansi. Have you heard about Jhansi? Jhansi province was captured by the British. The ruler of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai. Rani Lakshmi Bai wanted to approve his son or adopted son after the death of her husband, but British denied. Okay, and British didn't allow the ruler to inherit the property inherit that particular position after the death of her husband. This provoked Rani Lakshmi Bai. Rani Lakshmi Bai started a movement against British. Another one is Nana Saheb. Nana Saheb was the adopted son of Peshwa Bajirao. Peshwa Bajirao, after the death of Nana Saheb's father, British denied the pension. That's why Nana Saheb was also against. Like this way, the policies introduced by the British resulted lots of problems in India. As a policies, due to these policies, many rulers lost their power, lost their territory. They were all against British. These were the administrative reason. Is it clear? Administrative political reason means policies implemented by the British, lost the power of Indian rulers. They were all against British. Is it okay? The next is social reasons. Mainly, as we discussed in the previous part you studied, British appointed their representatives, their representatives in different areas of India. They imposed taxes. They imposed Diwani system. They introduced taxation system. They imposed taxes on the people, especially peasants. Okay, that means most of the land or production process was controlled by British. People had no money for paying the taxes. The peasants were against, or local people were against British. Peasants were against because of the high increase in taxes imposed by the British on these people. Already the rulers were against. The policies made dissatisfaction. And another side, in the countryside, country area, all the local people were against the British because they were forced to pay taxes to the government. But they had no money, they had no land. This worried or shocked shocked the local people. They also moved against rulers. Okay, that is the second important point. And third important point is military reasons. Okay, soldiers had also discontent. Soldiers had also the problems. They were not allowed, they were not ready to accept the British policies. This made the problems. Okay, these soldiers appointed by the British were forced to cross the sea and fight against Burma and other countries. Okay, but as per the custom of these Indian soldiers, especially from different communities or religious groups, crossing sea is against their religious laws. That's why they were not ready to cross the seas. This made discontent. Besides that, their payment, their work and timing, all these were different from the European soldiers and Indian soldiers. Okay, soldiers working in the same camp getting different salaries. Indian soldiers' salaries and rank was less than the European soldiers. This also worried the Indian soldiers. Soldiers were also against British. Political reason we discussed, social reasons we discussed, and the military reasons we discussed. Is it okay? The next, and the social policies and the immediate reason that we can discuss next. Okay? Is it clear? Okay, fine. Another important reason behind the 1857 revolt was the social reform introduced by the British. As you know that British introduced many reforms here, especially social reforms here, such as the abolition of Sati system. British introduced widow remarriage system. Caste system was abolished by the British, or they were against the caste systems, and they were against child marriage. Okay, and education systems were improved by the British. All these new reforms or modern or good social reforms introduced by the British made discontent or problems among the Indians, because these reforms were modern or social reforms introduced by the British, which made different reactions among the Indian community. Educated Indians accepted these reforms, but Orthodox Indians, Orthodox religious groups, they believed that these modern reforms introduced by the British would destroy Indian traditional culture. That's why they were against British reforms. And they were all against the traditional Orthodox Indians were all against British, because they believed that these modern or social reforms, abolition of Sati system, widow remarriage system, abolition of child marriage, etc., would destroy Indian culture and tradition. That's why they were against. In the same context, in 1850, British introduced a law here. As per this law, British allowed Indians who converted into Christianity allowed to inherit the property of their ancestors. Earlier, there was a custom in India. As per this, converted Christian had no right. If any Indians who converted to Christianity had no right to inherit the property of their ancestors or their fathers. Okay, but as per this 1850s new law, made conversion very easier. That means those who converted to Christianity, they had also right to get the property of their fathers. That means what? These policies or this 1850 law made conversion easier. These conversion policies of the British also made discontent among the Indian community. Okay, and all these including Hindus and Muslims were against these social reforms, these new laws. They were all moved or revolted against the British. Okay, that means already rulers were against, peasants and village people were against the British, soldiers were against the British, and now the Orthodox Indian people or local people were also against the British. In this context, one incident was happened. In the army military camp or Meerut military camp, British introduced a new cartridges, a new rifle, in which the cartridges were used in this rifle were coated with the fats of pig and cow. That means it was suspected that the cartridges used in this new rifle were coated with the fats of pigs and cows. As per the Indian custom or religious beliefs of both Hindus and Muslims, okay, the use of these cartridges, because these were suspected of being coated with the fat of the animals. That's why use of these cartridges were against their religious beliefs. That's why Meerut army camp, they refused to use this military drill, or they refused to use this new rifle introduced by the British. This provoked the soldiers of a military camp, soldiers of Meerut military camp. They denied or they refused to use this. Against this, and the British made the policies against the soldiers, and the soldier Mangal Pandey, you might have heard about that. Mangal Pandey was the first martyr. He was not ready to use these cartridges and he revolted against the British. He started a movement against British in the army camp. And then Mangal Pandey was arrested by the British and hanged to death. There started a rebellion. The soldiers of military camp started a rebellion, and it spread into a wide part of India. Already people were against the British, and the soldiers started this movement, and local people, rulers and Orthodox Indian people were all against the British. They started a widespread movement against rulers. This was 1857 revolt. Dear children, now we have completed the first part of the chapter. That means causes of the rebellion we completed. Okay, we discussed about administrative or political causes first. Then peasants or economical reasons we discussed. Then military or soldiers, military reasons we explained. Then social reforms, how did social reforms affect the British administration or affect the Indian people, we explained. Last we explained about immediate cause of 1857 revolt. The political and administrative reasons mainly about the policies introduced by the British. Military reason means soldiers were not happy with the British administration. That is the military reasons. And then economical reason mainly that taxes imposed by the British on the common people made problems. And the next part we will explain the social reforms. The new and modern reforms introduced by the British also shocked Indians. Immediate reason was the introduction of new cartridges or rifle introduced by the British. These were the causes in detail. We very clearly we explained. You read the textbook and then write the question and answer in your notebook and prepare for the class test. Okay. The next class we will be discussing the cause of the rebellion. Cause means who were the important leaders of this movement and which are the important areas or places of this revolt. And revolt was confined in certain area. Which are the important these areas and who were the important leaders of this rebellion. That we will be discussing in the next class. And then last part is the results. What happened? The rebellion also will be discussing in the next class. And then we have discussed only one question and answers. What were the causes of rebellion? That you read the textbook first and write the question and answer in your notebook. And I have already told you in the beginning, and post your notebook in the Google Classrooms. If anybody have any connection problems, net problems, you can send to my WhatsApp number. Okay, don't forget, tomorrow itself you should send to your notebooks or post your notebooks in the Google Classroom. Okay, thank you.
The first question, what were the causes of 1857 revolt? The causes of 1857 revolt. Answer first point. By the mid-18th century, Nawabs, Rajas and many ruling families of India lost their power. Second point, the British imposed high taxes and the rigid methods of revenue collection also dissatisfied the Indians. Third point, the Indian sepoys or soldiers were also unhappy about their payment, allowances and conditions of work. Fourth point, the Indian soldiers were forced to cross the sea and fight for the company. This worried the people. Fifth point, many Indians felt that the British were destroying their culture and tradition by introducing social reforms. That's why Orthodox Indians were also against British. The next point, the British introduced a rifle in which cartridges were suspected of being coated with the fat of cows and pigs. This affected the religious sentiments of the people, so the soldiers refused to use this rifle or cartridges. This was the immediate cause of the 1857 revolt. Then second question, what was the demand of Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi that was refused by the British? Demand of Rani Lakshmi Bai. Answer, Rani Lakshmi Bai wanted the company to recognize her adopted son as the heir to the kingdom after the death of her husband. The next question, what did the British do to protect the interest of those who converted to Christianity? Answer, the British passed a law in 1850 which allowed Indians who had converted to Christianity to inherit the property of their ancestors.